Right, well, first of all, just a massive thank you to Sharon for inviting me to present today, and nice to see everyone. And I've got a tough act to follow with some of the presentations this morning, but I'll do my best. And hello to everybody online as well. Try and remember to look that way every now and again. So the focus of the presentation, an evaluation of the PABS suicide bereavement training in 4 groups of professionals. I've only got 15 minutes to give you some context, to tell you what we did and to tell you what we found. So I'll kind of whiz through some of this. But just to follow up on my introduction, I'm an expert in the field of self-harm and suicide research, also have some lived experience of those as well. I've not got any lived experience of bereavement by suicide, but this is a real opportunity for me to work on this project, and something that I feel really passionate about, and an opportunity to work with Sharon as well, which is fantastic. I work with researchers across the UK and internationally. Some of those are in the Northwest and other institutions, and we have a network which is Share Now, which is Suicide and Self-Harm Research Northwest, of which our mission is to drive research that informs change. I don't expect you to be able to see these screenshots, but you'll get the slide deck afterwards, I assume. Some of my work you can see is around self-harm, injury to the body, and why particular bodily locations might matter. But I also do research on suicide as well, some of the functions and reasons of self-harm and how that drives future self-harm, and also might help us understand risk of future suicide attempts. So lots of different elements, really. But back to today. So the PABS training. So I'll tell you in a few slides exactly what the training involves. Oh, sorry, I've gone a bit too fast there. But this number was given earlier on. The number of people affected by every one suicide is up to 135. And that's absolutely astonishing and absolutely heartbreaking. Now, this doesn't mean 135 people will definitely need support. Not everybody will want to have support, but it's certainly a big number of people that we need to be thinking about. But when you think about support, I want you to think about the right kind of support. Because support's, if it's not good enough, if it's not the right quality, if it's not being given by skilled, by people, by compassionate people who are trained, then it's not going to help. We see in the NHS long-term plan, by 2023, I can't believe we're in that year already, to 2024, all systems will have, oh, I keep looking over there, all systems will have suicide bereavement support services providing timely and, I quote, appropriate support to families and staff. So this is really important, but again, I just want to draw your attention to the word appropriate. And when I think of appropriate, I think about, again, this need for support services to have the right people delivering those services and to have the right infrastructure. Sharon and colleagues conducted a really fantastic study. Over 7,000 people bereaved or affected by suicide in the UK. And some of the key headlines that I pulled out of this: we need dedicated suicide bereavement support specialists to be available. Again, specialists. They must be skilled, they must have the knowledge base, and they must have the understanding to really support the complexity of people bereaved by suicide, who've been through an extremely traumatic time. And I say some of the experiences of professionals and staff who are supporting those bereaved by suicide are actually quite difficult to read and hear. It's quite upsetting to think that staff themselves are feeling distressed, having to emotionally distance themselves to protect their own mental health. They feel inadequate at times, they feel powerless, they feel helpless, and a lack of training. So all these different things, and that's not to say there are no positive experiences, but just to pull out some of the key challenges that we need to be thinking about. And it's with this in mind that Lancashire and South Cumbria, so I'm from the University of Central Lancashire in Preston, but Lancashire and South Cumbria put together a suicide bereavement pathway. And it's not a linear pathway in the sense that we're all on the same path and there's different support services along the way that we all jump through. It's a pathway in the sense that there are different roads or different paths to different services that can support those bereaved by suicide. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. People can choose different services depending on their need at different points in their grief journey. But underpinning all this is the need for training of staff. As I say, support services have to be fit for purpose, and that comes in many shapes and forms, but it starts with the staff, supporting the staff to support other people, which is where we bring in the PABS training. And just to put this really simply, because I've not got a lot of time with you, but the training itself, to thinking about the aims of the training, it's to make sure that staff feel that they've got the knowledge, that they feel confident, and that they feel skilled enough to support people who really need them. So we really need to make sure people are having given access to this training. And I'll tell you in a second just what the kind of training covers, but one of the first study that evaluated the PABS training to support professionals who are supporting those bereaved by suicide found that the training was deemed to be acceptable, it was deemed to be effective, so this works. And in this study, it was, I've not put the full list up there, but it was general practitioners, mental health professionals, members of the police. It was a group of 60 or so professionals. But what we don't know is, when we've got such a diverse mix of professionals, do different professional groups perceive the training to be better or worse, or do they experience this kind of training any differently? And this is a really important question to ask actually. And I'm going to use the police just as an example here. So the police are frontline workers, and they have what I would say are nuances to the role or to their experience in supporting those bereaved by suicide. They're first on the scene, which is an extremely traumatic experience. And up to 95% of law enforcement officers say they've come across at least one suicide in their career, with an average of 31 across their whole career, which is actually quite shocking. And 1 in 5 can't shake the scene and the nightmares from that experience of attending a suicide. So these experiences and the nature of post-traumatic stress will also cut across other professions, but we need to start thinking, or I think we need to start thinking about different professional groups, and when we're administering training, it's about tailoring the training to the needs of those professional groups. So we had a look at the PABS training, and we evaluated it in 4 professional groups: 18 police, from the police, 15 from the armed forces, 13 hospice, and 15 from acute hospitals. So 61 in total. The PABS training itself is a 1-day training course, and it's highly interactive, face-to-face workshops delivered by 2 experts by experience who are highly skilled in delivering this kind of training and in suicide prevention and post-vention support. Covers a range of topics, as you might expect, around suicide prevention, attitudes and stigma, bereavement, suicide bereavement, lots of different topics that would be relevant. Now, before I tell you what we found, I just want to point out that when we looked at these 60 or so individuals and pulled the figures for the number or the percentage of the 15 or so, 17 police officers, 52.9% fell into the category of both. And this makes us think about the vulnerability or potential vulnerability of the people attending these training courses, and I think really flags the need for having those experienced trainers and 2 of those trainers in the room at the time as well to watch out for any support needs. So we did a quantitative evaluation. In other words, we collected some numbers, some data, and we wanted to know, does the professionals train at scores on knowledge, skill and confidence in responding to bereavement by suicide change before and after the training? And does it change in the same way across the 4 groups? Or in other words, do we have one group of professionals, such as the hospice staff, saying, yes, the training was great, it was effective, I feel more confident, I feel more skilled, but the police are saying, no, it wasn't quite for me. I don't feel any more confident now I've had the training. So that's what we're trying to unpack with the numbers. When it comes to the qualitative evaluation, this essentially means we gathered some text, we asked for some written feedback. We collected information around what they thought about the content, the materials, the trainers, and just asked for their honest and open thoughts. What did we find? No differences between the 4 groups when we looked at the quantitative aspect, the numbers. Now, in psychology and statistics, we're often looking for what we call group differences, and we find that interesting when males are different from females in aggression or something else. But in this context, it's actually really reassuring we don't find any differences in the effectiveness of the training across the 4 professional groups. What does this tell us? The training works for all professionals. It seemed to be effective. It upskills and it makes every group of professionals feel confident. But just one extra thing we looked at people's baseline level of knowledge, skill and confidence before they even took part in the training that day. And interestingly, I've pulled out, there's lots of findings are presented, but I've pulled out the police because one thing we found was that they rated themselves as being as knowledgeable as the hospice staff, the clinicians and the armed forces. But they actually rated themselves as feeling less skilled at responding to bereavement by suicide and supporting other people. They felt equally as confident in comparison to the armed forces and the acute hospital staff, but less confident than the hospice staff. So there's something there again with the police. We've got the police responding to suicides, often the first people on the scene, but also telling us that they don't feel skilled enough. Now, I'm just conscious I'm making generalisations here as well. These are numbers. Not everybody experiences and feels not as skilled and not as equipped. And the qualitative feedback. Brilliant. Everybody gave the really positive comments about the speakers, about the content and the delivery was the first theme. So we pull out themes here. We look at the text and we try and identify what are the common issues that are coming out. What are people telling us? So they were telling us about the content and the delivery by the trainers was good. That was the second theme, sorry, the role of the course trainers. The third theme was that they were telling us about how the training might apply to their practice once they get back on the front line or into their service. And the fourth theme was they were saying they felt a lot more knowledgeable and kind of more prepared. But some nuances here. So even though we found that the training is equally as effective in all 4 groups, in the quantitative data, so the numbers, when we look at the text-based responses, we found that the police and the armed forces are telling us that they'd like some modifications, some adaptations to the training. And a couple of quotes I've pulled out was that there was no reference to armed forces, death by suicide. And a member of the police said it would be good to see specific course material for different sectors. And there's kind of more quotes along those lines. But when you look at the data, they're essentially saying, for my professional role, I need more specific case studies, more bespoke training package that really pulls out what it's like to be a police officer or a member of the armed forces and to have to try and kind of use my skills and use my knowledge to support someone in what is a really traumatic, difficult time. So, recommendations. So, we always come up with recommendations at the end. So, research is great, but it's not great if it doesn't have recommendations for practice that actually make a difference to someone. So, my first recommendation is that the training, and this is ambitious, I know, is made available to all those providing workplace suicide bereavement support. And to do that, we need to embed it locally in like the Lancashire suicide bereavement pathway, and get the money to do that. So that's the sticking point, isn't it? But we can be ambitious about these things. The second one, the training is adapted and tailored to the needs of different professionals, with emergency services and the armed forces being the immediate priority. And the arrow to the RTS training, Sharon must have read my mind or knew what I was going to find, because she's already on it with the colleagues and already designing and trialling training for emergency services, which is fantastic to hear. And the third one, my recommendation is this ongoing monitoring and rigorous evaluation of the PABS training. Let's keep that going. Let's keep it under review. But for me, one thing I think we really need to find out is what happens when people leave the training room. So when they've done the training that day and they feel confident, they're feeling empowered, they feel more skilled, does it actually make a difference when they're out in the real world? And that can be measured in many different ways. So making a difference could be through the way they work with their clients. It could be through cascading information throughout the organisation by educating other colleagues. Now they feel more knowledgeable themselves. There's lots of different ways we can look at that, and I'd be really interested to try and get that piece of work going. I think that's me done. A few acknowledgements from the people who've been amazing and supported me throughout this piece of work. First of all, gave me the money to do it, and secondly, been there along the way. So Neil Smith, Helen, Parry and Vicky. Any questions, please, if I've got time? I haven't got the data for that. I don't know, Sharon, do you know if there's any data for fire and rescue services with PABS at the moment in training?
Yes, we've actually interviewed people from the emergencies, from all the emergency services, including RNLI, and actually there is more similarities than differences. So we've got those insights, and Lee, I want to congratulate Lee on he kind of led on the RTS training. He'll be talking later. So yeah.
Sorry, I realise I'm giving you my questions. Sharon.
No, this is good.
I'm getting out of it. I think there was
the very back. Sorry, we don't have mics going up there.
It's a good question. I was having a chat with somebody from the police whose role is to support mental health. This was a few weeks ago, and he was saying about that issue actually in trying to filter down that information to everybody. They've got the training embedded for the new recruits, but trying to upskill the rest of the workforce and the people supporting the police is a big challenge. And I think the biggest challenge was money. I think at the time I was told that all training had actually been stopped because of the staff shortages, and that was across the board. So I think the barriers, I mean, you're right, it's definitely important, but the barriers seem to be those systemic and financial issues at the moment. So we've got an ideal, haven't we, and who needs to be trained, what needs to be done, but making that happen can be quite difficult. Yeah. Yeah, so it's about upskilling those people who are providing support. I think it's almost as if, for me, every service, every police service and every other service needs to have a really skilled suicide liaison officer, somebody whose role it is to cascade that information down and to support the people on the ground who are doing that difficult job. But it's going to come back to money as well, isn't it? Again, yeah.
Thank you, Kathryn.
I think I'm out of time.
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer more questions over lunch if you come and find me.